This podcast is brought to you by Enlightening Learners Academic Coaching and Tutoring Services. In this presentation, we're going to discuss scatter plots. Some questions to consider. What is a scatter plot? How does information or data transform into a scatter plot? Define the parts of a scatter plot. What information does it show? How is a scatter plot used to predict future events? Here's an example of data that we can convert into a scatter plot. What we're comparing is student hours of study and their scores on Regency exams. This comes from a 2002 data whereby teachers were asked to survey their students in terms of how many hours they studied for the Regency exam, and their scores were plotted. As we graph this information, we find that our hours of study go on our x-axis. This is our control. Our Regency scores are plotted on our y-axis. In essence, this is our input, and the Regency scores are our output, or what we get. So to plot this data, we look at each of these pieces and plot it as an x comma y on a graph. This student studied 3 hours and scored 80. So we go here on the x-axis from 3 and we mark 80. This student studied for 7 hours and scored 100. So we go on the x-axis to 7 and then go on the y-axis to 100. Notice that the points are not connected. That's important with the scatter plot. Lastly, once the data has been graphed, we get an image of what it looks like. Notice that we can draw a line somewhere between the two sets of data so that some of our points are below the line and some of the points are above the line. This line is called central tendency. And it gives us an image that determines if it's a positive relationship, a negative relationship, or no relationship. What we see is that the more kids study, the higher the score they received on the Regency exam. Conversely, the students that studied the least amount scored the lowest on the Regency exams. Now, this is important when we're graphing this information because it can tell us what future events can occur. Hypothetically, with regards to this data, if we have a student that studies less than an hour, we can safely predict that he's going to score somewhere in this low range. If we have a student that studies more than 7 hours, we can safely predict that he's going to be somewhere in this range. Now, there are always students that don't do this, and there's always data that doesn't fit the line of central tendency. But for the most part, we can use this information to predict future events.